Hey everyone, you might have seen that if you want to overclock your CPU, you can go into like AMD Ryzen Master, or if you want to overclock your GPU, you can go into MSI Afterburner. But what about your RAM? Can you download some Corsair bit of software and then overclock your Corsair RAM? Well, unfortunately, no is the short answer. You pretty much can't do that, at least at the time of filming, because of some very good reasons, which is that basically the RAM is fundamental to your system startup process. For example, your motherboard's chipset and the CPU has something called the memory controller, and that then links with the actual RAM, which is why the RAM sticks are very close to the CPU on the motherboard, and that integration is incredibly important, and that happens at startup time. So basically, yeah, if you wanted to overclock the RAM, that's something that needs to be done in your BIOS before your system actually starts up. You can't just download a bit of software in Windows or Linux and overclock your RAM there. The second reason is memory training, and this happens with all sorts of RAM, but you particularly notice this with DDR5 based builds, because memory training is a lot slower on DDR5 builds. So basically when your system starts up, the CPU and the chipset has to sort of negotiate with the RAM and learn how the RAM works and how to best run it for the marketed speeds and things like that. That's called memory training, and again it inherently has to start at the actual boot up process. Now at this point you might be wondering, why can't you do it with the RAM, but you can actually overclock the CPU and the GPU within software, and that's because it kind of works differently. For example, the graphics card is almost its own mini computer. It's got its own GPU die and VRAM and PCB and everything else. And actually how fast the graphics card runs then can be controlled with software. So essentially then you can go into MSI Afterburner and you can change the voltages and the speed and things like that, and then either overclock or undervolt or whatever the GPU. So you can do that in software because it's like its own thing. But what about the CPU? Doesn't that then affect the startup process and everything else? Well, yes it does, because obviously you need a CPU to start up, but actually the CPU has something called the clock speed, which is how fast it runs. And modern CPUs actually have a variable clock speed. So you kind of got a base clock speed, and then the CPU can run faster as well, which is known as the turbo clock speed. And the way that works is the voltages are constantly varying to the CPU. And you'll see this if you just open Task Manager on Windows, for example. And as a result, you can also have software like AMD Ryzen Master to actually control the CPU speed there as well. But you can't do that with the RAM because, as I mentioned, the RAM is so inherent to the actual startup process. If you've got any further questions or comments though, please do leave me a comment. And if you enjoyed this video, please click the thumbs up button and please subscribe to see more videos like this. Thanks for watching.